She worked tirelessly, always overlooked, until her coworkers excluded her from the company retreat. But when she uncovered a secret buried deep within their polished office walls, everything changed. Now the team is in shock, and nothing will ever be the same. What would you do if you uncovered the truth that no one else dared to see? Share your thoughts below and keep watching to uncover how one revelation turned betrayal into transformation. The rhythmic clatter of keyboards and sporadic bursts of low chatter filled the open-plan office. The faint aroma of fresh coffee mingled with the sterile scent of printer ink, a daily backdrop to Marlene Caldwell's relentless pace. Her eyes flicked to the clock on her monitor. 3:14 p.m. Another email pinged, another task assigned, and another fragment of her day disappeared into the grind. Around her, the buzz of conversation hummed louder than usual, an undercurrent of excitement rippling through the team. It wasn't hard to figure out why. The upcoming retreat to Lake Travis had been the main topic of conversation for weeks, a rare escape from deadlines and deliverables. For most, it was a chance to unwind. For Marlene, it was another item on her calendar, if she'd been invited. "Have you packed yet?" Laura's voice broke into her thoughts. Laura, ever cheerful and effervescent, hovered beside Marlene's desk with a mug emblazoned with the company logo. "I can't wait to finally unwind." Marlene paused mid-typing, her brow furrowing. "Packed?" she echoed, her voice neutral. "For the retreat," Laura clarified, her tone tinged with surprise. "I haven't seen any details," Marlene said, her unease deepening. She clicked through her inbox again, searching for something, anything she might have missed. No emails, no itinerary, just the usual flood of client requests and project updates. Laura's smile faltered. "Oh, I thought Erica finalized the list yesterday. Didn't she send it to you?" "No." Marlene's voice dropped, her words deliberate. A knot of unease tightened in her stomach, threatening to unravel. Laura hesitated, her gaze darting away. "I'm sure it's just a mix-up," she mumbled, retreating quickly to her desk. Marlene sat frozen, her mind spinning. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the tile floor, and headed toward HR. The quiet efficiency of the HR department was a stark contrast to the vibrant energy of the office outside. Donna, the HR manager, looked up from her screen, her face warm but distracted. "Hi, Donna," Marlene began, her tone polite yet edged with urgency. "I wanted to ask about the retreat. I didn't get any follow-up emails or details. Could you check if my name is on the list?" Donna's fingers danced over her keyboard. Her eyes flicked to the screen, and she hesitated. "Oh," she murmured, "you're not on the list. Erica submitted the finalized attendees yesterday. I assumed everyone was informed." Marlene's stomach twisted. "I wasn't," she said, keeping her voice even. "Is there a reason I was excluded?" Donna leaned forward, lowering her voice. "You'll have to ask Erica. She was very particular about the list." "Thank you," Marlene replied curtly, her pulse thudding as she turned and walked toward Erica's office. Erica Monahan's corner office was a picture of corporate perfection. Her desk was an immaculate tableau of sleek technology and minimalist decor, and the faint scent of high-end perfume lingered in the air. Erica looked up from her laptop, her practiced smile unwavering as Marlene entered. "Marlene," Erica greeted, her tone breezy. "What can I do for you?" Marlene wasted no time. "I spoke to HR," she began. "I was told I'm not on the retreat list. I'd like to know why." Erica's expression didn't falter, but there was a flicker of calculation in her eyes. "Ah, the retreat," she said, leaning back in her chair. "Well, I had to make some tough decisions. We only have a limited budget, and I prioritize those who actively contribute to the team dynamic." Marlene's jaw tightened. "Are you saying I don't contribute to the team?" "Not at all," Erica replied smoothly, her tone laced with condescension. "But retreats like these are about fostering a certain team spirit. You've always struck me as more of an independent worker. I thought you'd prefer to focus on your projects here." The insult was thinly veiled, yet delivered with the poise of a seasoned manipulator. Marlene's hands clenched at her sides, but she refused to rise to the bait. "Thank you for clarifying," she said, her voice calm. Without waiting for a response, she turned and left. Marlene's desk felt more suffocating than usual when she returned. Her hands hovered over her keyboard, her thoughts spiraling. She had endured slights before, subtle dismissals, unwarranted critiques, but this felt different, deliberate, personal. Memories surfaced, unbidden, from her youth, times when she'd been excluded for not fitting neatly into others' expectations. The familiar sting of rejection threatened to surface, but she pushed it down. She wasn't that timid girl anymore. Determined not to let the matter rest, Marlene began observing Erica more closely. Erica wielded her charm like a scalpel, precisely cutting away at anyone who didn't fall in line. In meetings, her praise was generous but selective, reinforcing a hierarchy where loyalty to her was rewarded and dissent subtly punished. As the day wound down, Marlene lingered at her desk, her thoughts heavy. A hushed voice broke her concentration. She glanced toward the break room and spotted Cheryl Donovan. "I'm not sure about leaving her out. It doesn't seem fair," Cheryl was saying, her tone uncertain. Marlene froze, her curiosity piqued. She leaned forward slightly, straining to hear. "It's Erica's call," Cheryl added, her voice dropping further. "She said Marlene wouldn't fit in anyway." The words hit like a blow. Marlene's pulse quickened as realization dawned. Her exclusion wasn't a mistake, it was a calculated decision. Steeling herself, she resolved to dig deeper. Erica's carefully constructed facade was about to crack, and Marlene was determined to expose what lay beneath. The office was eerily quiet as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, fractured shadows across the rows of empty desks. The muted hum of the air conditioning mingled with the occasional beep of a printer, a haunting rhythm in the stillness. Marlene Caldwell sat hunched over her laptop in her corner cubicle, her fingers hovering over the keys, her brow deeply furrowed in thought. The retreat had drained the office of most of her coworkers, their earlier laughter and excited chatter replaced by this unnerving silence. Yet the words Marlene had overheard from Cheryl Donovan the day before lingered in her mind, sharp and insistent. Cheryl's voice had wavered, thick with hesitation, a thread Marlene couldn't resist tugging. Just as she saved the latest revision of her project, light footsteps broke the silence. Marlene's head snapped up. Cheryl entered the break room, her movements stiff and uncertain, her gaze darting nervously toward the empty desks. She hesitated before pouring herself a coffee, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for a sugar packet. Marlene leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing as she studied Cheryl's body language. The woman's shoulders were hunched, and she avoided looking toward Erica's corner office as though the very sight of it might summon her. Cheryl's actions weren't the only thing gnawing at Marlene's attention. Another quiet presence lingered in the office. Ben Larson, the reserved yet meticulous software engineer. He was seated a few desks away, his head bowed over his laptop, the glow of the screen casting soft shadows across his face. Sensing Marlene's gaze, Ben glanced up, offering her a small, almost shy smile. He rose from his seat and strolled over to her desk, his steps measured. "Late night, huh?" he asked, his tone light but his eyes searching. "Seems like it," Marlene replied evenly, though the weight of the day pressed heavily on her. Ben hesitated before pulling up a chair. "You're not going on the retreat, are you?" Marlene's shoulders stiffened. "No, Erica made that decision." He nodded, his expression darkening. "I'm not surprised." Marlene tilted her head, curiosity piqued. "Why do you say that?" Ben glanced around the empty office, leaning closer as he lowered his voice. "I've been on the receiving end of Erica's tactics. She doesn't deal well with people she sees as a threat. You're competent, you don't fall in line, and you question things. That makes you a target." Marlene's brow furrowed. "Have you experienced this firsthand?" Ben nodded, his jaw tightening. "She blocked one of my projects from going live for months. Her excuse? It wasn't aligned with company priorities. The real issue was that I questioned some of her budgeting decisions. She's careful, though. She knows how to manipulate the narrative and cover her tracks." As they spoke in hushed tones, an unspoken camaraderie began to form. Ben's words fueled Marlene's determination, and her voice took on a sharper edge. "If Erica's hiding something, there has to be a trail," she said. Ben nodded thoughtfully. "There were discrepancies in the budgets for the last few campaigns she led. Small things, but they didn't add up. Have you noticed anything unusual in your projects?" Marlene's mind raced as she sifted through her memories. "I have. I chalked it up to mismanagement, but now I'm not so sure." Hours passed as the two worked side by side, poring over archived files and financial reports, their eyes scanning rows of data for inconsistencies. The dim office lights flickered occasionally, adding an edge of unease. At one point, Marlene froze, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Ben stiffened, his eyes darting toward the shadows at the edge of the office. A faint click echoed, a door closing perhaps, or the sound of someone moving in the distance. For a moment, neither spoke, the tension crackling between them. Finally, Ben exhaled, shaking his head. Probably just the building settling, he said, though his voice carried a hint of doubt. They returned to their work, but the stakes now felt higher. Every creak, every rustle seemed to threaten exposure. Then Marlene stumbled upon an email thread buried deep in the archives. Her pulse quickened as she skimmed through the messages, each line sending a fresh jolt through her system. "Ben," she said, her voice trembling, "you need to see this." Ben leaned over her shoulder, his expression darkening as he read. Erica had authorized a series of questionable budget reallocations, masking them as necessary adjustments. But the most damning piece was a message addressed to another manager. "If anyone questions this, we can attribute it to Marlene's oversight. She won't push back." The words struck like a physical blow. Marlene leaned back in her chair, her hands gripping the edges of her desk. Her chest tightened, anger and betrayal bubbling to the surface. "She set me up," Marlene whispered, her voice barely audible. Ben straightened, his jaw clenched. "That's blatant. She's using you to deflect suspicion." Marlene forced herself to breathe deeply, steadying her racing thoughts. "This is what I needed," she said firmly, "but it's not enough just to have the evidence. I need to make sure it's impactful when I present it." Ben nodded, his voice steady. "If you go in unprepared, she'll twist it around. But if we plan this carefully, she won't have a way out." The weight of their findings hung heavily in the air as they packed up for the night. For the first time in weeks, Marlene felt a glimmer of hope. She wasn't alone anymore. With Ben by her side and the beginnings of a strategy, the odds felt less insurmountable. As they left the dimly lit office, their footsteps echoing down the empty hallways, Ben placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll figure this out together," he said, his voice carrying quiet confidence. Marlene offered a faint but genuine smile, the fire in her eyes rekindled. Erica's games were unraveling, and Marlene was determined to see them through to the end. The Monday morning buzz in the office was charged with an undercurrent of tension. Conversations that normally flowed with ease seemed fragmented, punctuated by furtive glances and muffled whispers. Marlene Caldwell felt the weight of the shift the moment she stepped through the glass doors. The vibrant hum of her once familiar workspace now carried an edge of something darker, sharper, directed at her. As she made her way to her desk, she caught snippets of conversations from huddled groups. "She's impossible to work with. Did you hear about the budget report she messed up? Erica said she's always been like this. It's no wonder." The words stung, but Marlene schooled her face into a neutral expression. She couldn't let them see her falter, not when she knew exactly where the rumors were coming from. Marlene settled into her seat, her movements deliberate as she logged into her computer. The laughter and chatter that usually filled the office seemed to die as she passed, replaced by sidelong glances and awkward silences. A few colleagues who had once been friendly now avoided her gaze entirely. She felt their unease like a physical barrier. Meanwhile, in Erica Monahan's glass-walled office, Cheryl Donovan stood rigid, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Erica leaned back in her sleek leather chair, her polished smile exuding a practiced charm. "Cheryl," Erica began, her tone silky, "you've always been one of the most reliable members of this team. I trust you understand how important it is to present a united front." Cheryl nodded hesitantly. "Of course." Erica's smile widened, but her eyes sharpened. "Good, because Marlene's behavior is creating unnecessary tension. It's crucial that we all stay aligned. I need to know I can count on you." Cheryl swallowed, the weight of Erica's gaze pressing down on her. "You can," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. Erica's expression hardened imperceptibly, the warmth in her tone replaced by something colder. "You've been such a valuable part of this team, Cheryl. I'd hate to see anyone jeopardize their position by associating with disruptive influences." The veiled threat hung heavily in the air. Cheryl nodded again, her throat dry, as Erica's words settled like stones in her stomach. As the day wore on, the whispers grew louder. Marlene kept her head down, forcing herself to focus on her work, but the tension was impossible to ignore. Every glance in her direction felt like a dagger, every muttered comment a blow to her resolve. During lunch, Ben Larson slid into the seat across from her in the break room. His expression was grim, his usual easy demeanor replaced by quiet urgency. "It's getting worse," he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the hum of the vending machine. Marlene didn't need to ask what he meant. "She's relentless," she replied, her tone calm despite the storm brewing inside her. "She's spreading rumors about you," Ben continued. Budget mismanagement, insubordination. She's painting a picture and people are starting to believe it. Marlene's jaw tightened. She's not just trying to discredit me. She's building a case against me. Ben nodded, his eyes dark. We need to act fast. If she convinces enough people, the truth won't matter. Late that afternoon, Cheryl approached Erica's office to drop off a report. The door was slightly ajar and she hesitated when she heard Erica's voice, low and clipped, on the phone. Yes, I've already taken care of it, Erica said. The documents have been adjusted. There's no way she can trace it back to me. Cheryl's heart raced as she pieced together the implications of Erica's words. Her grip on the report tightened, her palms damp with sweat. She stepped back quickly, her mind spinning, and hurried to her desk, the paper crumpling slightly in her hand. As evening fell, the office emptied, leaving Marlene alone at her desk, her shoulders tense but her focus unwavering. Cheryl lingered near her own workstation, her mind a storm of doubt and guilt. Erica's words echoed in her head, but so did the memory of Marlene's steady resolve in the face of growing hostility. Taking a deep breath, Cheryl approached Marlene's desk. Hey, she said softly, startling Marlene from her thoughts. Cheryl, Marlene said, her surprise evident. What's up? Cheryl glanced around nervously before lowering her voice. I need to talk to you, privately. Marlene studied her for a moment before nodding. Let's go to the break room. Once inside, Cheryl hesitated, her fingers fidgeting with the strap of her bag. I don't know how to say this, she began, her voice barely above a whisper, but I think Erica is doing something unethical. Marlene's eyes narrowed. Unethical how? Cheryl glanced at the door, ensuring they were alone. I overheard her on the phone. She's covering up something, altering documents maybe. I'm not sure of the details, but it's bad. Marlene leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. Why are you telling me this? Cheryl hesitated, her internal conflict plain on her face. Because I think she's crossed a line, but I'm not sure I can go against her. She's made it clear there would be consequences. Marlene nodded slowly, her tone gentle but unwavering. I understand, and I appreciate you telling me. But Cheryl, if you have information that can prove what she's doing, you have to come forward. Not just for me, for yourself. Cheryl's eyes filled with uncertainty. I don't know if I can. She has so much power here. You don't have to decide now, Marlene said, her voice steady. But think about it. You're stronger than you think. As Cheryl left the break room, her mind churned with doubt and fear. She had taken the first step, but the shadow Erica cast over her still loomed large. The coffee shop was cloaked in a quiet stillness, its corners steeped in shadow, and the muted hum of an espresso machine filling the air. Marlene Caldwell sat at a small table tucked away from the main seating area, her fingers drumming lightly against the grainy wood. The dim lighting softened the cafe's warm tones, creating a sense of intimacy that felt at odds with the tension in her chest. She watched the door, the faint scent of roasted beans mingling with the crisp night air that seeped in whenever it opened. The chime of the door drew her attention. Cheryl Donovan stepped inside, her shoulders hunched, as though bracing against an invisible weight. Her gaze darted around the room before landing on Marlene. For a moment she hesitated, clutching her bag tightly, then exhaled and walked over. Thanks for meeting me, Cheryl murmured, as she slid into the seat opposite Marlene. Her voice was subdued, her hands gripping her bag like a lifeline. Marlene offered a steady smile. Of course, I appreciate you reaching out. Cheryl glanced around the room, her fingers trembling slightly as she loosened her grip on the bag. The cup of tea Marlene had ordered for her sat untouched, the steam curling lazily into the air. Cheryl picked it up, cradling it between her palms. Her shoulders sagged as if the warmth of the cup was the first comfort she'd felt in days. I don't even know where to start, Cheryl admitted, her voice barely audible. Start with whatever feels right, Marlene encouraged, keeping her tone soft but purposeful. I know this isn't easy, but I need to understand what's really going on. Cheryl took a shaky breath, her eyes fixed on the table. I've worked under Erica for years. At first, I admired her confidence, the way she seemed to have everything under control. But over time, I started noticing things, little things that didn't add up. When I tried to bring them up, she made it clear that questioning her wasn't an option. Marlene leaned forward, her expression intent. What kinds of things? Cheryl hesitated, her gaze flitting nervously toward the other tables. No one seemed to be paying attention, but the weight of what she was about to say was clear in her expression. Budget discrepancies, falsified reports, scapegoating team members whenever something went wrong. She's careful. She always has someone else to take the fall. Has she done that to you? Marlene asked, her voice edged with quiet anger. Cheryl nodded, her eyes downcast. She's implied more than once that my job security depends on my loyalty, and with 2 kids and a mortgage, her voice broke, and she took a deep, shuddering breath. I can't afford to lose everything. Marlene reached across the table, her voice firm but compassionate. I understand, Cheryl, truly I do. But if Erica's actions are putting the company and its people at risk, she needs to be held accountable. And we can't do that without your help. For a long moment, Cheryl was silent. Then with trembling hands, she reached into her bag and pulled out a printed email. This is one of the emails she sent me, she said, her voice tight. It ties her directly to the manipulated reports. She asked me to sign off on the changes, but I refused. Marlene scanned the document, her stomach tightening with each line. The email was damning, clear evidence of Erica's wrongdoing. She set it down carefully, her mind already racing with possibilities. Cheryl, this is exactly what we need, Marlene said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. This could prove everything. But what if it's not enough? Cheryl asked, her voice small. Erica has so much influence. What if no one believes us? We'll make them believe us, Marlene replied firmly. You're not alone in this. Ben and I are already gathering evidence. And with this email, we have a solid case. We just need to present it in a way that can't be ignored. Later that evening, Marlene sat in Ben Larson's modest apartment, the small living room lit by the faint glow of his laptop. Evidence was spread out across the coffee table. Spreadsheets, emails, and handwritten notes pieced together into a damning narrative. We'll start with the manipulated budgets, Marlene said, her voice clear and deliberate. Then we'll show the email trail that ties her directly to the falsified reports. Finally, we'll point out the pattern of favoritism and scapegoating. It's all connected. Ben nodded, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he organized their findings. We need to be meticulous, he said. Erica's not the type to go down without a fight. And we'll need Cheryl to testify, Marlene added. Her first-hand account will be crucial. Ben glanced up, his expression serious. Do you think she'll go through with it? Marlene hesitated. She's scared, and I don't blame her. But I think she knows this is bigger than just her or me. If Erica gets away with this, she'll keep hurting people. The next day, Cheryl sat at her desk, her heart pounding as she replayed her conversation with Marlene. The email she'd handed over felt like a grenade she'd just pulled the pin from. Marlene's words echoed in her mind. This is bigger than just us. By the time the office began to empty for the evening, Cheryl found herself walking toward Marlene's desk. Marlene looked up, her expression unreadable but patient. I'll do it, Cheryl said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. I'll testify, but only if others back me up. I can't do this alone. Marlene nodded, her respect for Cheryl growing. You won't be alone, I promise. The night before the meeting, Marlene sat at her dining table, the email from Cheryl lying beside her notes. Her hands trembled slightly as she rehearsed her presentation, the gravity of what lay ahead pressing heavily on her shoulders. This isn't just about me, she whispered to herself. This is about all of us. As the sun rose the next morning, Marlene stood outside the meeting room doors. The hallway was quiet, the anticipation heavy in the air. She took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. Behind those doors, the battle for truth awaited. The conference room was thick with anticipation as employees from every department filled the seats, their voices a low hum of chatter, punctuated by the occasional burst of laughter. Marlene sat near the middle, her hands gripping a manila folder that felt heavier than it should. Her palms were damp, and her heart thudded in her chest. She stared at the front of the room where Erica Monahan stood, radiating confidence in a tailored navy blazer. A slide projected onto the screen behind her read, Department Achievements, a Year of Success. Marlene glanced around the room. Cheryl sat near the back, her posture stiff, her gaze fixed on the floor. A few rows ahead, Ben turned slightly, catching Marlene's eye and offering a small, encouraging nod. She inhaled deeply, her resolve hardening even as doubt whispered at the edges of her thoughts. Erica began with her usual polished flair, her voice carrying the easy authority of someone accustomed to command. Good morning, everyone. Before we dive into the details, let me take a moment to celebrate the incredible strides our department has made this year. Thanks to the dedication of this amazing team, we've surpassed projections and set a new standard for excellence. Polite applause rippled through the room, But Marlene kept her hands still, her gaze locked on Erica. As Erica clicked through slides filled with glossy metrics and graphs, Marlene's stomach churned. To the uninformed, the numbers looked impressive, but Marlene knew better. "These achievements are a testament to our collective effort," Erica continued, her tone smooth and deliberate. "And while we face challenges, it's clear that with the right leadership, those challenges become opportunities." Marlene's jaw tightened as she caught subtle glances from a few colleagues. She knew the whispers circulating about her. Erica had worked hard to frame her as a troublemaker, a misfit. But today, Marlene would set the record straight. When Erica's presentation ended, she turned to the audience with a gracious smile. "Any questions?" The room fell silent, the weight of formality pressing down. Marlene's pulse quickened as she raised her hand. Every head turned in her direction. "Yes, Marlene?" Erica said, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second. "What's on your mind?" Marlene stood, her legs unsteady beneath her. "I have a question about the budget allocations for the third quarter," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. "Specifically, the discrepancies in project expenses." A ripple of curiosity swept through the room, and Erica's expression tightened. "Discrepancies?" she repeated, tilting her head in feigned confusion. "I'm not sure what you're referring to." Marlene's grip on the folder tightened. "I'm referring to reports where the numbers don't align with the actual expenditures. I've reviewed the data, and there are significant inconsistencies." Erica's tone turned patronizing, a practiced weapon. "Marlene, I appreciate your attention to detail, but I think you may have misunderstood the reports. Budget adjustments are common, especially in a fast-paced environment like ours." The air in the room thickened, the tension almost palpable. Marlene opened the folder and pulled out a stack of documents. "I anticipated you might say that," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Which is why I brought evidence." Gasps punctuated the silence as Marlene walked to the front, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. She placed the documents on the podium, her movements deliberate. These emails and altered reports show a clear pattern of manipulation. Funds allocated for team resources were redirected for personal gain under the guise of operational costs. Erica's face paled, but she quickly recovered, her voice rising in protest. "That's a serious accusation, Marlene, and completely unfounded." "It's not unfounded," Marlene countered, pointing to the documents. "Emails, timestamps, revisions, they all lead back to you." The room erupted in murmurs as the implications of Marlene's words sank in. Ben leaned forward in his seat, his expression a mixture of concern and pride. In the back, Cheryl's hands clenched tightly together, her mind racing. Erica's composure cracked. "This is absurd," she snapped, her voice sharp with desperation. "You're twisting facts to create a narrative that doesn't exist. I've always acted in the best interest of this team." Marlene turned to address the room, her voice unwavering. "I'm not asking you to take my word for it. The documents speak for themselves." Cheryl's heart pounded as she scanned the room. Her colleagues' faces ranged from confusion to dawning realization. She caught Ben's eye as he glanced back, his silent encouragement steadying her. Taking a deep breath, Cheryl rose to her feet. "She's right," Cheryl said, her voice trembling at first but gaining strength. "I've seen it too. Erica pressured me to sign off on altered reports. When I refused, she implied my job was at risk." The murmurs grew louder, a mixture of shock and disbelief. Erica's expression twisted with anger. "Cheryl, this is outrageous. How dare you?" "I dare, because it's the truth," Cheryl interrupted, her voice firm. "And I'm not the only one who's noticed. If anyone else here has seen something suspicious, now is the time to speak up." The room fell silent as employees exchanged uncertain glances. Erica's carefully crafted facade was crumbling, the weight of the accusations pressing down on her. A deep voice from the back of the room cut through the tension. "That's enough," said one of the senior managers, his expression grim. "This meeting is adjourned. We'll conduct an immediate investigation into these allegations. Erica, I expect your full cooperation." Erica opened her mouth to protest, but closed it just as quickly, her face a mask of barely concealed fury. As the room began to empty, the tension lingered like a heavy fog. Marlene gathered her documents, her hands trembling slightly now that the confrontation was over. Cheryl approached her, her face a mixture of relief and apprehension. "You did the right thing," Cheryl whispered, her voice barely audible over the murmurs of departing employees. "I just hope it's enough." Marlene offered a faint smile. "It's a start." As they left the room together, Erica remained frozen in place, her carefully constructed image shattered. The office hummed with nervous energy as whispers of the internal investigation spread like wildfire. Employees moved with an almost frenetic edge, their conversations hushed but intense. Erica Monahan's office stood locked and dark, her nameplate conspicuously absent from the door. HR representatives moved methodically, summoning employees for interviews while others anxiously speculated about what might happen next. Marlene sat at her desk, her hands resting on her keyboard, though her screen displayed only a blank document. The occasional vibration of her phone offered brief distractions, supportive messages from a handful of colleagues, subtle acknowledgments of her courage. Yet her nerves refused to settle. Relief mingled uneasily with apprehension. Exposing the truth had been the first step, but the aftermath was proving equally complex. By mid-morning, the first interim report arrived. Its findings were unequivocal. Erica had manipulated financial records for personal gain and coerced team members into covering her tracks. The company acted swiftly, revoking her access to all systems and placing her on administrative leave. A sterile email from upper management confirmed the news without naming names, yet everyone knew who it referred to. As Marlene read the email, she glanced across the room at Cheryl. Cheryl's shoulders relaxed, and for the first time in days, she met Marlene's gaze with a faint, grateful smile. That quiet acknowledgement steadied Marlene. Together, they had confronted something far larger than themselves, and now the company was forced to reckon with its own culture. But Erica was not going quietly. Stripped of her authority but not her cunning, she began reaching out to her closest allies. Using her personal phone, she crafted carefully worded messages, laced with just enough doubt and promises to sow seeds of loyalty among her followers. "People like Marlene can't be trusted," she wrote in one message. "They manipulate the truth to tear others down. Don't let her narrative destroy what we've built." One such message reached Cheryl during her lunch break. Cheryl stared at her phone as it buzzed with Erica's number. Hesitant, she answered, curiosity battling with trepidation. "Cheryl," Erica began, her voice smooth but taut, "I need you to understand something. This situation has been blown out of proportion. You know how much I've done for this team. For you." Cheryl gripped the edge of her desk, her knuckles whitening. "I don't think this is an appropriate conversation, Erica." "I'm offering you an opportunity," Erica continued, her tone sharp yet enticing. "You and I can turn this around. Back me up, and I'll make sure you're taken care of. Promotions, salary adjustments, whatever you need." The temptation lingered, a stark reminder of the power Erica once wielded. But as Cheryl thought of Marlene's unwavering stance, her own sleepless nights, and the guilt of silence, something shifted. For the first time, Cheryl felt the strength to resist. "No, Erica," Cheryl said firmly, her voice steady. "I won't be part of this anymore. Whatever happens now, you'll have to face it on your own." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening before Erica exhaled sharply. "You're making a mistake, Cheryl. When this is over, don't think for a second you won't regret this." The call ended abruptly, but Cheryl felt an unexpected sense of clarity. The freedom that came with standing by her values outweighed any fear Erica could instill. For the first time in years, Cheryl felt like she was reclaiming her own voice. By late afternoon, the investigation reached its climax. HR called a company-wide meeting to announce Erica's official termination. The memo, sent shortly after, detailed her misconduct and emphasized the company's renewed commitment to transparency and integrity. For the first time, Marlene and Cheryl's names were acknowledged publicly, commending their bravery in bringing the truth to light. The office responded with mixed emotions. Some employees murmured about the inevitability of Erica's downfall, while others questioned what her absence would mean for the department's future. Yet an unspoken sentiment hung in the air. This was the start of something new. Marlene sat at her desk, rereading the memo as the gravity of the moment settled over her. Relief warred with exhaustion. The fight had taken its toll, but the results were undeniable. As Cheryl approached, Marlene offered a small, tentative smile. "I wanted to thank you," Cheryl said, her voice barely above a whisper, "for standing your ground. It helped me find mine." Marlene's smile softened. "You did the hard part, Cheryl. You made the choice that mattered." Cheryl hesitated, then extended a hand. "Maybe we can work together to make this place better, for everyone." Marlene took the hand firmly. "I'd like that." Later that evening, Marlene lingered at her desk after most of the office had cleared out. The hum of fluorescent lights and the faint rustle of papers provided a calming backdrop as she reflected on the day's events. Her mind turned to the decisions that had brought her here, not just her own, but Cheryl's, Ben's, and even those of the colleagues who had quietly offered their support. In her quiet moment of reflection, Marlene realized that the real victory wasn't just exposing Erica. It was the shift in the office's culture, however subtle, that signaled the beginning of a collective transformation. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel pride, not only in what they had achieved, but in the potential for what lay ahead. The email came late in the evening, its subject line blunt yet intriguing: invitation to discuss future opportunities. Marlene stared at the screen, her cursor hovering over the message. A mix of apprehension and relief swirled inside her. The sender's name, Stephanie Hill, Senior Vice President of Operations, carried weight. Marlene had rarely interacted with her, and the significance of this invitation wasn't lost. This was more than just acknowledgement. It was an opportunity, but what kind? The office felt transformed the next morning. The hallways, once adorned with generic corporate artwork, now displayed vibrant posters bearing slogans like "Transparency fuels trust" and "Teamwork beyond boundaries." The atmosphere, though cautious, was undeniably lighter. Colleagues who had once dismissed her nodded in acknowledgement as she passed, some even stopping to commend her bravery. The surreal changes felt almost like stepping into a parallel reality where she was no longer invisible. By the time Marlene arrived at the sleek conference room for her meeting, her nerves were simmering beneath her calm exterior. Stephanie Hill greeted her warmly, her tone both authoritative and reassuring. "Marlene, thank you for coming," Stephanie began, her steady gaze meeting Marlene's. "Your actions over the past weeks not only upheld the company's values, but reminded us of the standards we must strive for every day." Stephanie didn't waste time diving into the proposal. She explained that the company was launching an interdepartmental initiative to rebuild trust and improve communication across teams, an effort aimed at undoing the toxic culture Erica had cultivated. Marlene's name had risen to the top as the ideal candidate to lead the project. Sliding a formal proposal across the table, Stephanie said, "We need someone who embodies integrity and resilience to guide this effort, and we believe you're the right person for the job." Marlene's breath caught. A promotion? It was the validation she had long craved, yet a knot of doubt tightened in her chest. She smiled politely, thanking Stephanie for the opportunity, and asked for time to consider it. Leaving the conference room, the weight of the decision pressed heavily on her. Back at her desk, the unopened proposal lay before her like a challenge she wasn't sure she was ready to face. Her thoughts churned, past failures and doubts creeping to the forefront. That was how Ben found her, still staring at the untouched folder, her expression clouded. "I heard about the meeting," Ben said softly, pulling up a chair beside her. "Why don't you look happy?" Her words tumbled out unfiltered. "What if I'm not cut out for this? What if I fail? I've spent so much time fighting to be heard. How can I lead when I've barely felt like part of the team?" Ben leaned forward, his tone calm but insistent. "You're not giving yourself enough credit. Everything you've been through has made you stronger, not weaker. Most leaders don't understand what it's like to be on the outside looking in. You do. That's exactly why you're the right person for this." His words resonated, but they didn't immediately dispel her doubts. That evening, Marlene revisited the proposal. This time, she allowed herself to truly envision what her leadership could look like. She imagined fostering a workplace where no one felt the isolation or exclusion she had endured. A space where transparency wasn't just a slogan, but a core value. As her vision crystallized, the weight of her doubts began to lift, replaced by a quiet sense of purpose. The next morning, Marlene entered Stephanie's office with a renewed resolve. "If I can help create a place where no one feels the way I did," she said, her voice steady, "then I'm all in." News of her promotion spread quickly. That afternoon, Cheryl stopped by her office, her expression brighter than Marlene had ever seen. "Congratulations," Cheryl said, her voice warm with sincerity. "I'm proud of you." After a pause, she added with a grin, "If you need someone on your team who knows what not to do, I'd love to help." Ben was next, his easy grin lighting up the room as he entered. "Count me in too," he said simply, his presence a calming contrast to the whirlwind of change around her. Later that day, Marlene, Cheryl, and Ben gathered in a small conference room, their energy a mix of determination and cautious optimism. The whiteboard in front of them quickly filled with ideas, strategies for improving communication, plans for cross-departmental collaboration, and ways to hold leadership accountable. Cheryl's insights into past mistakes added a critical layer of understanding, while Ben's methodical approach ensured their plans were both practical and actionable. As the session wrapped up, Marlene looked at her new team. For the first time in years, she felt truly supported, not just by their skills, but by their shared vision for a better future. This wasn't just a new chapter in her career, it was the start of a new culture, one built on trust, collaboration, and the hard-earned lessons of the past. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Austin skyline in hues of orange and pink. Marlene sat on her small balcony, cradling a steaming cup of chamomile tea. The rhythmic hum of the city below contrasted with the calm she felt within, a rare tranquility she'd fought hard to achieve. Months had passed since Erica's departure and the whirlwind of change that followed. Marlene marveled at how much had transformed, not just in the workplace, but within herself. Her apartment, once a sterile retreat from office stress, now radiated warmth. Framed photos adorned the walls, chronicling milestones of her new team, brainstorming sessions, team lunches, and their most recent retreat under the Texas sun. Her gaze fell on the latest edition, a group picture from the retreat. Everyone stood beaming, their camaraderie evident. She ran her fingers over the frame, her chest swelling with quiet pride. This was her legacy, not just policies or workflows, but the people she had inspired. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. Marlene leaned over to check her laptop and opened an email. The subject line read, "Seeking guidance." "Hi Marlene, I hope this email finds you well. I just wanted to say how much I admire the way you've handled everything these past few months. Your leadership has been inspiring, and I was wondering if you'd be open to meeting for coffee sometime. I could really use some guidance as I navigate my role here. Best, Rachel." Marlene paused, letting the words sink in. Rachel, a junior designer, was one of the company's rising talents. The note wasn't the first of its kind. Since stepping into her leadership role, Marlene had received messages from employees seeking advice or mentorship. But Rachel's message carried a poignancy that resonated deeply. It reminded Marlene of her own struggles early in her career, longing for guidance she never received. Closing her laptop, Marlene leaned back in her chair, her thoughts drifting. Had she done enough? The workplace was undeniably better. Policies were fairer, communication more transparent, and the oppressive culture Erica had fostered was fading. But scars lingered, both hers and others. Could she do more to ensure that no one felt the isolation she once had? Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her reverie. Cheryl's name lit up the screen. "Just wanted to say thanks again for everything, Marlene. I wouldn't be where I am without your example. Let's grab lunch soon." Marlene smiled. Cheryl's transformation over the months had been extraordinary. Once hesitant and fearful of rocking the boat, Cheryl had become one of the most vocal advocates for fairness in the workplace. Her gratitude was genuine, but Marlene knew Cheryl had found strength within herself too. Another buzz, this time Ben. "Have you seen the new team performance metrics? If not, I'll bring them over tomorrow. They're proof your vision is working. Proud to be part of it." Marlene chuckled softly. Ben had been her rock throughout the chaos, his steady presence bolstering her when her doubts threatened to overwhelm. Their bond, built on mutual respect and shared ideals, had grown into a friendship she cherished deeply. The evening air grew cooler as Marlene reflected on the journey. She had learned hard but invaluable lessons: resilience in the face of betrayal, the power of collective courage, and the importance of integrity. These lessons weren't just hers. They were shared by everyone who had chosen to rise above fear and apathy to make the workplace better. Her gaze drifted back to Rachel's email. Tomorrow she would meet Rachel for coffee, ready to offer the guidance she had once longed for. Mentorship, Marlene realized, was as vital as leadership. It was a way to pass on what she had learned, ensuring that the seeds of change continued to grow. As her phone buzzed again with a lighthearted group message from Cheryl and Ben, Marlene smiled. Their banter was filled with plans for the weekend, a reflection of the trust and camaraderie they had built. For the first time in years, she felt not just optimistic but truly hopeful for herself, her team, and the company's future. With one last glance at the vibrant city skyline, she set the framed photo back on her desk, her shoulders squared with purpose. Tomorrow was a new day, full of possibilities, and she was ready to face it with the integrity and resolve that had carried her this far. As Marlene leaned back in her chair, she allowed herself a moment to reflect. The journey had been anything but easy, but every challenge had been worth it. Standing up for the truth, building bridges, and fostering an environment of fairness had given her a profound sense of purpose. Yet she knew her work wasn't done. The story was no longer hers alone. It belonged to everyone who had chosen courage over complacency, integrity over convenience, and hope over fear. What about you? Have you ever faced a moment where standing up for the truth meant risking everything? What does forgiveness mean to you in the aftermath of betrayal? Share your thoughts, your own moments of strength or reflection, and let's continue this conversation. Together, we can uncover the lessons within these stories and apply them to our lives. If Marlene's journey resonated with you, feel free to share where you're reading from or tell us about your experiences. Don't forget to subscribe for more heartfelt stories about resilience, growth, and the power of human connection. Thank you for being part of this journey.